Sir, this terminal is for first-class passengers only, not people like you. I need you to gather your things and leave." The words did not slip out. They were not an accident, not a misread, not a moment of confusion that could be walked back with an apology and a smile. Diana Croft said them the way people say things they have said before, with the flat, practiced confidence of someone who has never been told that she was wrong. She stood with her arms crossed, her Apex Airways supervisor badge catching the afternoon light that poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Denver International Airport's premium terminal. She was 36, blonde hair pulled back at the nape of her neck, uniform pressed to a crease that could have cut paper. She had been the terminal supervisor for 3 years. In those 3 years, she had built the premium lounge into exactly what she believed it should be: quiet, exclusive, and orderly. She took pride in that. She considered it her professional achievement. The man she was speaking to did not stand up. He sat in one of the terminal's wide leather chairs, his long frame relaxed but not careless, his hands folded in his lap with a stillness that had nothing to do with submission. He looked up at Diana the way a man looks at something he has seen many times before and has long since decided how he will respond to it. He was 38, 6'2", lean in the way that distance runners are lean, every ounce earned over years of early mornings and long roads. He wore gray Nike running shorts that still showed faint rings of salt along the hem, the honest evidence of sweat that had dried and crusted during a race that had ended 4 hours ago. His shirt was blue moisture wicking, fitted across the shoulders in the way that athletic clothes fit people who actually use them. His running shoes were white and marked with the kind of scuffs that come from 26.2 miles of asphalt. Around his neck hung a finisher's medal from the Denver Marathon, its ribbon slightly frayed where it had rubbed against his collar during the final grinding miles of the race. He carried a single black duffel bag. No designer logo. No monogram. Nothing that announced itself. He looked up at Diana Croft with eyes that held no anger, no defensiveness, and no surprise. Just a calm, level steadiness that unsettled her more than any outburst would have. "I have a ticket," he said. His voice was quiet. Not soft. Quiet. There is a difference. Seat 3A. Flight 519 to Atlanta. Would you like to see it? Diana extended her hand without answering. The gesture had the weight of someone who expected immediate compliance and had never had to ask twice. The man reached into his duffel bag and produced a boarding pass. He placed it in her hand without leaning forward, without rushing, without the apologetic urgency that she had come to expect from people she challenged in this terminal. Diana looked at the boarding pass with the careful attention of a person searching for a flaw. She did not find one. The ticket was legitimate. She could see it in the first 3 seconds. Flight 519, Seat 3A. First class, full fare, properly issued, properly processed. The name on the ticket was printed clearly. Marcus Harwell. Legitimacy, however, was not the issue. Diana turned the boarding pass over. She examined the back. She held it at a slight angle as if the light might reveal something the direct view had missed. She did this for 6 minutes. Not because she needed 6 minutes to read a boarding pass, because 6 minutes of being held by someone in authority, 6 minutes of being made to wait and justify and wonder was itself a message. Marcus Harwell waited. He did not drum his fingers. He did not sigh. He looked at the tarmac through the tall windows and waited with the patience of someone who had decided a long time ago that he would never give anyone the satisfaction of watching him break. Diana finally spoke. She did not lower her voice. This could have been purchased fraudulently. We have had situations before. People use stolen reward points, stolen credit cards. They book tickets they have no right to, and then they count on the fact that we will not look closely enough. She paused. I look closely. She said it loudly enough for the passengers in the nearest chairs to hear. That was intentional. The announcement was not aimed at Marcus. It was aimed at the room. Marcus did not react. He returned his gaze from the window to Diana's face and folded his hands back in his lap. A shadow appeared at Diana's shoulder. Brett Larson was 43 years old, and he had the build of a man who had once worked in corrections and had never fully left that job behind in the way he held himself or the way he assessed a room. He was big, close-cropped gray at his temples, airport security uniform pressed and straight, and his posture was that of someone who had decided something was a problem before he knew what the problem was. His eyes moved to Marcus the way a camera pans to motion automatically without consideration. "Problem here?" Brett asked. Diana did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Marcus. "This gentleman seems confused about which area of the airport he is entitled to use." Brett studied Marcus. He did it slowly, without pretending to be subtle about it. What he saw was a black man in athletic clothes, a gym bag, a marathon medal that meant nothing to him, no suit, no briefcase, no visible markers of the kind of wealth that Brett associated with first-class terminals. The mathematics seemed simple enough to Brett Larson. It always did. Marcus looked at Brett directly. He read the name badge. "Officer Larson. I am not confused. I am sitting in the terminal that my ticket grants me access to, waiting for my flight, exactly like every other person in this room." Brett's jaw shifted slightly. He was not accustomed to being spoken to that way by someone he had already categorized. "Sir, I am going to need to see multiple forms of identification. We have protocols for situations like this." Marcus looked at him for one quiet beat. Situations like what exactly? Brett did not have a clean answer. He moved to procedure instead, the familiar shelter of official language. He explained that premium terminal access required verification. He explained that the verification process was standard, and that Marcus should have nothing to worry about if his documentation was legitimate. He said the word legitimate twice each time with a slight emphasis that made it sound like a question rather than a statement. Marcus listened to all of it. When Brett finished, Marcus reached into his duffel bag and produced his driver's license. He placed it on the small table beside his chair without standing up. Brett picked it up, studied it, turned it over. His expression did not change. Marcus watched him and said nothing. Around them, the premium terminal carried on its Sunday afternoon life. Business travelers pressed their laptops and murmured about quarterly calls. Families occupied the corners of the room with the quiet confidence of people who had never once wondered if they belonged. The air smelled of expensive coffee and leather conditioning oil and the particular silence of a space designed to make money feel calm. But that calm was shifting. Small conversations were stopping. Eyes that had been directed at phones and newspapers were lifting. The kind of awareness that spreads through a room when something happens that everyone recognizes even before they can name it was moving through the terminal like a slow current. Diana stepped closer to Marcus. She was not touching him. She was simply removing the distance between them in a way that was meant to feel like pressure. "You are holding up the verification process," she said. "If you have nothing to hide, this should take 5 minutes. If you are uncomfortable with 5 minutes, that tells me something." Marcus looked at her. Something in his face had not changed since she first approached him, but something in his eyes had. Not anger, not heat, but the quiet ignition of a decision being made. "Diana," he said. He read her name badge the same way he had read Brett's. He said it without hostility and without warmth. "Point to the dress code. Show me the written policy that defines marathon finishers' gear as grounds for removal from this terminal. I will wait while you find it." Diana did not go find it. There was nothing to find. She pivoted. She turned to Sandra Bloom, a gate agent standing 12 feet away, who had been watching the interaction with the careful stillness of someone trying to decide which way the wind was about to blow. Sandra was 31. She had worked for Apex Airways for 3 years. She was not a cruel person, but she was a person who had learned to read which way authority was leaning and to stand on that side until the situation resolved itself. Diana shot her a look. The look was not ambiguous. Sandra reached for her radio. Marcus watched this happen. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply watched, and in his watching, there was a quality of attention that would have unnerved Diana Croft if she had been the kind of person who noticed such things. He was giving them rope. He was watching them decide how much they wanted to use. Brett spoke again. He had called for backup while Marcus was watching Diana. His voice now carried the official weight of a man who had decided this situation required more firepower. "Sir, I want to be very clear. If you continue to refuse our security screening, we will be forced to escalate this to airport police, and you will be removed from the premises." Marcus looked at Brett Larson for a long moment. Long enough to be deliberate. Long enough for everyone watching to understand that the pause itself was an answer. Then he said, "Officer Larson, I am not refusing anything. I am waiting. There is a difference. And in about 20 minutes, you are going to understand exactly what that difference costs." Brett did not know what to do with that sentence. He did not have a category for a man who responded to a threat with arithmetic. So he did what men like Brett Larson always do when they run out of logic. He made it louder. He reached for his radio again. He called for backup. He used words like uncooperative and potential fraudulent access and unauthorized presence in a restricted area, and his voice carried across the premium terminal with enough volume to be sure that every person in the room heard exactly what he was accusing Marcus Harwell of being. Marcus sat still through all of it. He was not going anywhere, and they were about to find out why. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below and tell me how you would have responded in that seat. Because what happens next changed everyone in that terminal, including people who never said a single word. The ambient noise of the premium terminal changed. It did not get louder. It got thinner. Conversations that had been running at a comfortable murmur dropped to whispers, and then the whispers stopped too. Laptops did not close all the way, but eyes moved off screens. Magazines stayed open on the same page for longer than they should have. The particular collective act of pretending not to watch was happening everywhere in the room, which meant that everyone was watching. Rosa Figueroa was 27 years old, and she had been watching since before anyone else. She worked behind the gate counter at the far end of the terminal, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started the shift neat and was now slightly less so, the natural result of a Sunday that had been busier than the schedule predicted. She had been processing upgrades when Diana Croft first approached the man in the leather chair, and something in the body language of the interaction had pulled her attention away from her screen and kept it there. Rosa could see the boarding pass from her position. Not close enough to read the name, but close enough to read the class designation and the status markers along the top. She had processed enough tickets in 4 years to recognize a full-fare first-class pass at 30 feet. She had also processed enough interactions to recognize what was happening in front of her. Her stomach tightened. On the other side of the terminal, Ethan Calloway had been trying to finish a brief for a client call he had tomorrow morning. He was 51 from Dallas in a gray suit that had seen better mornings, but was still respectable by afternoon. He had flown first class for 22 years in and out of premium terminals in 11 countries, and he had a deeply ingrained habit of not looking up from his work unless something required his attention. This required his attention. Ethan set his laptop to standby. Not closed. Standby. He was not ready to fully commit to whatever was unfolding across the room. But he was no longer pretending to read legal language. Diana escalated. She did not wait for the additional verification she had claimed to be pursuing. She did not call the ticket desk. She did not open a system screen to pull the reservation. She simply moved closer to Marcus and changed her approach from bureaucratic to personal, which is what people do when the bureaucratic approach has not produced the result they wanted. "Look at yourself," she said. Her voice had dropped slightly, but the drop was tactical rather than private. Low enough to sound measured, not low enough to be missed by the nearest 4 rows of seats. "You ran a marathon this morning. You are sweaty. You are in gym clothes. You are carrying a gym bag. This is not a locker room. This is a premium facility, and we maintain a certain standard." Marcus did not look down at himself. He did not look at his clothes, or his bag, or his medal. He looked at Diana. "Point to the dress code," he said. "Show me the written policy that says a marathon finisher's medal is grounds for removal. I will wait while you look for it." Diana's expression shifted in a way that was almost imperceptible. Not embarrassment, something that would have become embarrassment in a person with more self-awareness. In Diana, it became something harder. She turned to Sandra Bloom and gave her a look that contained an entire conversation. Sandra reached for her radio. Her voice, when she spoke into it, was professional and controlled, and it named what she was reporting as a possible unauthorized access situation, which was the kind of language that sounded like procedure, but meant something else entirely. Rosa heard the radio call from her counter. Her jaw tightened. Brett Larson returned from wherever he had been and positioned himself behind Marcus's chair. Not beside it, behind it. A placement designed to remove the option of standing up freely to create the sensation of being surrounded without requiring physical contact. Brett had learned this in corrections. It was a technique for establishing dominance without providing evidence. Marcus did not look behind him. He was aware of Brett's position the way experienced people are aware of things they have decided not to give the satisfaction of a reaction. Rosa Figueroa left her counter. She did not run. She did not make a scene of it. She simply stepped around the edge of the gate desk and walked across the terminal floor to the cluster forming around Marcus's chair, her incident log open in her hand, her pen uncapped. She stopped a few feet from Diana and said clearly, and without her voice fully cooperating with her intention to sound steady, "His boarding pass is valid. I could see the class designation from my counter. He paid full fare. Whatever is happening here, it is not a verification issue." Diana turned to her. The look she gave Rosa was the look supervisors give employees who have just made a very consequential mistake. "Stay at your counter, Figueroa. This is a security matter." "Then it should be handled correctly," Rosa said. She did not go back to her counter. She stood where she was, log open, pen moving. The terminal noticed. The act of a young gate agent walking away from her station to stand beside a passenger was not a normal thing, and people who have been watching an abnormal situation know how to recognize when it deepens. 3 phones came up. Not quickly, not dramatically. The careful, deliberate elevation of a phone to eye level when someone decides that what they are looking at needs to be preserved. Brett's voice was louder now. The louder he got, the more the terminal quieted in response, which had the effect of amplifying him further, which caused him to speak louder still, a cycle that was working against him and that he did not seem to have the self-awareness to recognize. "Sir, this is your final informal warning. If you do not comply with the security screening protocol I have established for this situation, I will be contacting airport police, and the interaction will become formal. At that point, the outcomes available to you become significantly more limited." He said significantly more limited with a weight that was meant to be threatening. It landed the way threats land when the person delivering them has begun to sense that they are not in the position they assumed. Marcus looked at Brett with an expression that a person might use when observing a complicated weather pattern. Patient, analytical, not afraid. "Officer Larson," he said, "I want you to hear me clearly. I have not refused anything. I have shown my identification. I have provided my boarding pass. I am sitting in a chair in a terminal I have legitimate access to. You have not articulated a single specific policy I have violated, because there is not one. What you have done is tell me in several different ways that I do not look like someone who belongs here. He let that sit for 2 full seconds before he continued. I want you to think about that very carefully, because 20 minutes from now the cost of this moment is going to be very clear to you. I am giving you this chance to stop while the cost is still something you can afford. Brett's jaw worked. He did not have a response that fit the situation. His training had prepared him for anger, for demands for tears for people who either complied or erupted. Marcus was doing neither, and the absence of either option left Brett with nothing to push against, which made him push harder against nothing which was beginning to look exactly like what it was. Ethan Calloway set his laptop all the way down. He looked at the man in the running clothes. He looked at the 3 security personnel surrounding a single seated man who had not raised his voice or made a sudden movement in the entire time Ethan had been watching. He looked at the phones that were now filming. He looked at Rosa Figueroa standing her ground with a pen and an open log. He thought about the dozens of times he had walked into this terminal and through terminals like it. He thought about whether anyone had ever followed him from the door to ask whether he was sure he belonged here. He thought about whether his clothes had ever been used as evidence against him. The answer to all 3 was the same. Not once. Not in 22 years. He opened his mouth, closed it. He was not ready yet. But the internal accounting was happening, and it was not resolving in any direction that let him keep looking at his screen. I want to stop here for just a second and ask you something. If you were sitting in that terminal right now watching this unfold, would you have said something, or would you have told yourself it was not your business? Because what these witnesses decide to do in the next few minutes matters more than the jet, more than the contract, more than any of it. Stay with me. Sandra Bloom had gone very quiet. She was still standing near Diana, technically on the correct side of the situation by geography, if not by conscience. But she had stopped speaking. She held her radio loosely in one hand, and she was looking at the floor with an expression that was not entirely comfortable. Brett made his move. He lifted his radio and called in a request for additional officers. He described Marcus as an uncooperative individual who had refused security screening and was creating a disturbance in a premium facility. He said the word disturbance twice. The terminal heard every word. Rosa wrote it down. Timestamp 9:58 a.m. Marcus pulled out his phone. He did not call anyone yet. He typed a short message, set the phone face down on the armrest beside him, and looked out the window at the tarmac where the afternoon light was turning the concrete silver and gold. He was thinking about his father. He was almost always thinking about his father. He did not let it show, not here, not yet. The terminal was a held breath. Diana stood over him, her authority stripped down now to volume and proximity, because the procedural justification had not materialized, and she was not the kind of person who could admit that. Brett stood behind him, waiting for instructions that would give the moment the shape it needed to be officially defensible. Sandra stood to the side, holding a radio she had stopped talking into, and Rosa Figueroa stood 3 feet away with her pen moving. At the end of this moment, Brett lifted his radio one more time and used language that named Marcus as a potential security risk. His voice carried across the entire terminal. Every phone that was filming caught it clearly. Marcus heard it. He did not move. He simply picked up his phone, read the reply to the message he had sent, and set it back down. Whatever he had set in motion, it had been received. Marcus looked at the tarmac. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Apex Airways premium terminal, Denver's runways stretched out in long gray lines under the afternoon sky. Planes moved in the middle distance, ponderous and graceful in the way that large things can be when they are doing exactly what they were built to do. A 737 lifted off to the northwest and climbed steadily until it became a shape and then a glint and then nothing. Marcus watched it go. Diana was speaking to Sandra in a low voice 10 feet away. Brett was watching Marcus with the studied attention of a man waiting for the moment when his subject would make the mistake that justified everything. Neither of them was looking at the tarmac. Marcus was. He was thinking about his father. Robert Harwell had been 39 years old in 1988, which was the year he walked into a bank in Decatur, Georgia, with a business plan that a loan officer named Gerald something, Marcus had never been able to remember the last name, had read in 40 seconds before setting it face down on the desk and saying, "Son, do you understand what you are asking us to risk, Robert?" Harwell had understood exactly what he was asking. He had also understood exactly what Gerald something was really saying. He had sat in that chair with his hands folded in his lap and he had said, "I understand what I am asking you to do. What I want to know is whether you understand what you are passing up." Gerald. Something had not found that funny. Robert had left the bank without the loan. He had spent 3 weeks making 9 more appointments at 9 more banks, and he had walked into every one of them in the same blue suit with the same business plan, with the same folded hands, until a woman named Carol Beaumont at the 7th Bank had read the plan all the way through and approved the loan for $14,000 against the equity in the family home. With that $14,000, Robert Harwell had purchased a single delivery truck, a used Ford, with 140,000 miles, and a cargo bed that needed a new floor, and he had begun building Harwell Global Logistics, one route at a time. Marcus had been 8 years old that year. He remembered the truck. He remembered his father coming home from the first delivery, still in the suit despite the July heat, and sitting down at the kitchen table and saying to his wife, Marcus's mother, Patricia, "I think we are going to be fine." Not celebrating. Stating. The way Robert Harwell stated everything he was certain of, quietly, directly, as if certainty did not need volume to be real. Marcus was 38 now. His father had been gone for 14 months. The company Robert built with that one truck and that one route now operated with 18,500 employees in 47 states. Its annual revenue was $3.2 billion. It held logistics contracts with every major airline in the country, including a $65 million annual agreement with Apex Airways, the same Apex Airways whose name was stitched onto the badge of the woman who had just told Marcus he did not belong here. Marcus had known about the contract when Diana Croft first approached him. He had said nothing about it. He had shown her his boarding pass and waited. He wanted to see what they would do when they thought there were no consequences attached to their assumptions. He had seen it many times before the moment when people like Diana make their decisions. He had learned to wait for it because the waiting was the most instructive part. The decision they made when they thought no one important was watching told him everything about who they were. He was 11 years old the first time he watched his father be handled at an airport. They were flying to Chicago for a meeting. His father was in the blue suit, briefcase in hand, boarding pass ready. The gate agent at Hartsfield-Jackson, a young white woman with a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes, had looked at Robert Harwell, and then looked at the white businessman behind him, and then looked at Robert again and said, "Sir, are you in the correct line?" His father had not raised his voice. He had not sighed. He had said, "Are you sure that is the question you want to ask?" And then he had produced his boarding pass and waited while she processed it with the slight uncomfortable efficiency of someone who had realized she was wrong but could not find the language to acknowledge it. On the plane, when the seatbelt sign went off and the Chicago skyline appeared through the window, Robert had leaned toward Marcus and said something Marcus had carried every day since. Never answer their assumption. Answer their question. There is always a real question underneath, and it is never about the ticket. Marcus had asked what he meant. Robert had thought about it for a moment. They ask if you belong somewhere. The real question is whether you are going to let them decide the answer. You are not. You answer that question first. Everything else follows. Marcus had been 11. He had nodded without fully understanding. He had spent the next 27 years understanding it completely. His personal net worth was $820 million. It was largely invested in Harwell Global Logistics and a diversified portfolio that his financial team managed with the kind of disciplined strategy Robert had drilled into him long before Marcus knew what a portfolio was. He owned a home in Atlanta that he had bought because his father had always wanted to live on the east side of Peachtree Road and a home on Martha's Vineyard where he went when he needed to remember what quiet actually sounded like, and a home 4 miles from this airport in Denver, which he had purchased 3 years ago because he ran the Denver Marathon every year as a commitment to his cardiovascular health, and because the altitude training made him a better runner. He had finished this morning's race in 3 hours and 44 minutes. He had crossed the line and kept walking because stopping had always felt wrong to him, like punctuation inserted in the middle of a sentence. The medal around his neck was not decoration. He had not put it on for anyone's benefit. He had put it on because his father had not lived long enough to see him finish, and wearing it was the closest thing Marcus had to his father standing at the finish line. Robert Harwell had died of a heart attack 14 months ago at 67 years old, 3 weeks before the Forbes profile ran. The profile that Marcus had worked for 20 years to earn, the one that would have let him place the magazine in front of his father and say, without any words at all, "We made it. We got through all their doors, and we built something they cannot take back." Robert never saw the profile. Marcus had read it alone on the back porch of the Decatur house in the dark. He had started training for this year's Denver Marathon the following morning. The plane he had watched lift off was gone now. The tarmac was busy with the quiet choreography of a large airport in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, trucks and ground crews moving between aircraft with the efficiency of people who understand that in their world a minute costs money, and precision is a form of respect. Marcus picked up his phone and read the reply to the message he had sent. "Captain Miles fueled and ready. Standing by." Marcus typed back, "Bring her in. Gate 19, 14 minutes. He set the phone back down. He looked at Diana, who had finished her quiet conversation with Sandra, and was turning back toward him with the expression of someone who has reloaded and is ready to try again. He looked at Brett, still positioned behind him, still waiting. He looked at Rosa Figueroa, still standing 3 feet away with her log, open her pen, making quiet marks in the margins of what was happening. He looked at the tarmac one more time. His father had told him to wait, to let them see him wait, to give them the gift of their own worst decision, fully made in full light, with witnesses present. Marcus had waited long enough. Diana returned with a strategy. Marcus could see it in the way she straightened before she spoke, the slight reset of the shoulders that people do when they have decided to be official. She had understood somewhere in the previous 10 minutes that her approach had shifted from procedural to personal, and that the personal approach was not working the way personal approaches usually worked. So she was going back to procedure. She was going to bury what she was doing in language that sounded like policy. "Mr. Harwell," she glanced at the boarding pass she was still holding. "I need you to provide a second government-issued photo identification proof of the credit card used for this purchase and the account number associated with your Apex frequent flyer profile. These are standard steps for elevated verification in cases of suspected fraudulent access." She said standard, but she had not produced a policy document. She said elevated verification, but she had not defined what elevation threshold had been triggered. She said suspected fraudulent access, but she had not articulated a single specific indicator of fraud beyond a man sitting in a chair in clothes she found inappropriate. Marcus looked at her for a moment. "Diana, I have shown you what a passenger is required to provide at point of verification. My boarding pass is legitimate. You have had it in your hand for 9 minutes without scanning it. If you would like to verify it, there is a scanner at the gate counter behind you. That is your job, not mine." Diana's face did something complicated. The kind of complicated that happens when a person is being told something accurate by someone they have decided does not have the right to be accurate at them. She did not go scan the boarding pass. Ethan Calloway stood up. He did not make an announcement. He did not draw attention to the standing before he was ready. He simply put his laptop in his bag, straightened his jacket, and walked across the terminal to where Diana was standing over Marcus. He stopped beside Marcus's chair and looked at Diana directly. "Ma'am," he said, "I have been sitting in this terminal for 45 minutes. In that time, I watched you wave 11 people through without asking a single one of them for additional identification. I watched you greet a man in jeans and a golf shirt and wish him a pleasant flight. I want to know specifically, please, why this man is different." Diana turned to him with the automatic authority of a supervisor addressing someone who has exceeded their appropriate zone of involvement. "Sir, this is a security matter between airline personnel and this passenger. We do not require passenger input on security decisions." "I am not offering input," Ethan said. "I am asking a question. You can answer it, or you can not answer it, but the fact that you are not answering it will be noted by everyone in this terminal who is currently recording this interaction." He said this without heat. He was a man who had spent 30 years in corporate law in Dallas, and he had the particular calm of someone who had learned that the most effective thing you can do in most situations is simply require the other person to provide a justification they do not have. Diana did not answer his question. Brett moved. He stepped from behind Marcus's chair to beside it, which placed him between Marcus and Ethan, with the body of a large man who used to work in corrections. The message was physical, and it was clear this conversation is being redirected. Sir Brett said to Ethan, "I need you to return to your seat and allow security personnel to manage this situation. If you interfere with an active security matter, you expose yourself to removal from this terminal as well." Ethan looked at Brett. "On what grounds would you remove me?" Brett did not have an immediate answer. "Obstruction of security procedures," he said finally. "Show me the policy," Ethan said. He used exactly the same words Marcus had used, and he said them with the same quietness which made it sound like something had just been confirmed. Rosa Figueroa was writing. She wrote down Ethan's question. She wrote down Diana's non-answer. She wrote down Brett's response to Ethan. She wrote the timestamp 10:06 a.m. Her handwriting had steadied in the last 5 minutes, which happened to her when the anger got large enough to organize itself into purpose. Brett called for the 2 additional officers he had requested. They arrived within 90 seconds, both younger than Brett, both reading the situation with the wariness of people who have been told to back up a situation without being told what the situation actually is. They positioned themselves near Brett without taking any independent action, which told Marcus a great deal about whether they had been given a justification they believed. The terminal was fully watching now. There was no pretense of not watching. Phones were visible. 2 people near the window had stood up from their chairs to see better. A mother with a daughter of about 9 sat near the check-in area, and Marcus could see the daughter's face turned toward him with the direct, honest attention that children have not yet learned to disguise. The mother had one hand on the daughter's arm, not pulling her away, just touching her, grounded. 15 years ago, Marcus's father told him something he never forgot. "Stay with me because you are about to hear it, and when you do, it will change everything about how you watch the rest of this." Brett addressed Marcus one more time. His voice had the quality of a door being closed, firm, finalized, no space left. "Sir, this is your final warning. Gather your belongings and vacate this terminal immediately. If you refuse, you will be detained for trespassing in a restricted area and failure to comply with security directives. I want to be clear that this is not a request." The terminal did not breathe. Marcus stood up. He did not stand up because Brett told him to. He stood up because he was done sitting. He stood up with the unhurried, deliberate movement of a man rising from a chair after a long meeting that he has been running since the beginning, and when he reached his full height, the marathon medal caught the light from the windows, and the room registered his height, and his stillness, and the particular quality of his presence in the way a room registers something that changes the weight of the air. He looked at Diana first, then Brett, then around the terminal at every watching face, slowly enough for each one to feel that he had seen them specifically. When he spoke, his voice was lower than it had been at any point in the previous 45 minutes. People in the far corners of the terminal stopped talking to hear him. He made them come to him with the quiet he always had. "I am not leaving," he said. "I am not trespassing. I have a valid ticket. I have committed no violation of any policy that either of you has been able to name, and I have conducted myself with more professionalism in the last hour than I have witnessed from anyone wearing this airline's uniform." He paused. Not for effect, because what came next required its own space. "I want both of you to understand something. I am giving you this moment, right now, to stop. To choose differently, to decide that what has been happening in this terminal for the last 45 minutes is something you want to walk back from." He looked at Diana, then Brett. "After this moment, I cannot give it back to you. The choice will have been made, and everything that follows from the choice is going to be very expensive." Diana looked at him. For 1 second, the calculation that runs constantly behind her eyes paused. It was the pause of someone who has just felt the edge of something large without being able to see its shape. Then the calculation resumed. "Security," she said. "Remove him. Now." Brett moved toward Marcus. Rosa Figueroa stepped forward. Ethan Calloway did not move. He stood exactly where he was. He did not need to move. He was already between Brett and Rosa, and he was recording, and his presence was the particular kind of obstruction that is impossible to argue against without recording exactly what you are doing for every phone in the room. And then, from across the terminal through the entrance that led in from the main concourse, a figure appeared. Not running, not urgent. Moving with the steady, purposeful walk of someone who had received a message and understood exactly what it meant and had decided how to respond. Officer Darnell Reyes had arrived. Brett's hand reached for Marcus's arm. Marcus did not flinch. He did not step back. He turned his head very slowly toward Brett's hand and then up to Brett's face, and the quality of his attention in that movement was something that several people in the terminal later described in the same way without having talked to each other about it. They said it felt like watching someone choose not to do something, and the choosing was more powerful than the doing would have been. Brett's hand stopped before it made contact. In the space of that stopped motion, Marcus was somewhere else entirely. He was on the back porch of the house in Decatur. It was 3 months before his father died, though none of them had known then how close the end was. Robert Harwell was in his chair, the old green one with the armrests worn smooth from decades of the same hands resting in the same places, and he was thinner than he had been at Christmas, but the authority that lived in the set of his shoulders had not thinned at all. Marcus had driven down from Atlanta to spend the weekend. It was not a scheduled visit. He had simply felt the need to come the way children feel the need to come home when something in them recognizes a season ending without being able to name what the season was. They had eaten dinner. They had watched the sun go down. They had talked about the company, about a new contract Marcus was pursuing, about a young logistics manager in the Charlotte office who Robert thought had the instincts for the executive track. They had talked about everything around the thing neither of them was saying. Then Robert had been quiet for a while, looking out at the yard, and then he had said, "The hardest thing I ever did was not building the company. You know that, right?" Marcus had waited. The hardest thing I ever did, his father said, was not letting them see me break. He said it the way he said things he had thought about many times, carefully, with the slight pause of someone placing something fragile exactly where it belongs. Every time someone told me I did not belong somewhere I had worked my way into. Every meeting, every terminal, every table, every time some man with a title and a handshake looked at me like I was a problem that needed explaining. Every single time I had to make a choice. Marcus asked quietly, "What was the choice?" Robert looked at him. "Lose my temper and give them a reason, or stay still and give them nothing." He paused. "Staying still is the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the $14,000 loan. Harder than the first contract. Harder than the first million, because when you lose your temper, they win. They get the story they were hoping for. They get to say, 'See, I was right about him.' Staying still takes everything you have, and at the end of it, they still have not gotten what they wanted." Marcus had asked, "Were you ever scared you were going to lose?" His father had looked at him for a long moment, every single time. But I made a decision early that I would always be the last man standing in the room, and I never let the room see me wonder if I could do it. There was a pause between them that was not uncomfortable, the kind of pause that fathers and sons have when something real has just passed between them and both of them are holding it carefully. Robert said, "I need you to promise me something." Marcus waited. "When it happens to you, and it will happen regardless of the company, regardless of the money, regardless of everything we have built, because that is not what those moments are about. I need you to remember what I just told you. Stay still. Let them see you wait. The waiting is what scares them. They do not know what to do with a man who will not perform their script." Marcus had said, "I promise." Robert Harwell died 6 weeks later. A Tuesday morning cardiac arrest quick enough that there was no suffering, which was the only mercy in it. Marcus had been in a board meeting in Atlanta when his mother called. He had excused himself from the room and sat in the hallway for 20 minutes before he could make himself move. He had not cried in the hallway. He had thought about the green chair on the back porch and the thinness that had been in his father's face at Christmas, and the way Robert had said, "I need you to promise me something," and he had understood that his father had known something Marcus had not let himself know. He had stood up from the hallway floor after 20 minutes and gone back into the board meeting and finished it. Not because he did not feel it, because Robert Harwell had taught him that the way you honor a promise is by keeping it even when keeping it is the hardest thing you have ever done. Back in the terminal. Brett's hand had not completed its reach. Marcus looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, with the specific clear-eyed patience of a man who has been given a set of instructions by someone he loves and who has decided all the way down to the level where decisions become character that he is going to follow them. "Brett," he said, quietly, just his name. The way you say a name when you want the person to understand that you are seeing them clearly and that what you see is not impressive. Brett's arm came down. He had not decided to lower it. It had lowered. Marcus picked up his phone. He opened his contacts. He found the name he was looking for and pressed call. He held the phone to his ear, not on speaker, and said 2 sentences. Then he ended the call and placed the phone face up on the armrest beside him. He looked at the tarmac. He thought about his father one more time. He thought about staying still and giving them nothing and being the last man standing in the room. Then he looked back at the room at Diana and Brett and Sandra and Rosa and Ethan and every watching face and every raised phone, and he decided that the waiting was over. Marcus made another call. This time he put it on speaker. Not loudly, not dramatically. He simply set the phone on his knee, with the speaker facing up, and the voice that answered filled the immediate space around his chair with the crisp professionalism of someone who had been waiting for exactly this call. Harwell Global Logistics, Mr. Harwell's office. Nadia Cruz. his executive assistant. 3 years in the role, the kind of assistant who did not need to be told twice about anything ever. Nadia Marcus said, "I am at Denver International, Apex Airways Premium Terminal. I need you to pull up the Apex Airways account file and have it ready. Also, contact Captain Miles. Tell him to bring the aircraft to Terminal B, Gate 19. Full arrival protocol. Already have your location tracked, sir." Nadia's voice did not change in register or pace. She had fielded stranger calls. "Captain Miles is on standby. ETA to Gate 19 is approximately 14 minutes. Shall I alert Mr. Voss at Apex Regional?" "Not yet," Marcus said. "Give them a few more minutes." He ended the call. He set the phone back on his knee. He looked up at Diana Croft. Diana's face had done something in the space of that phone call. It had not changed in the ways faces change when they are performing reactions. It had changed in the smaller, involuntary ways that faces change when something has shifted that cannot be unshifted. A very faint tightness around the eyes. A quality of stillness that was different from her earlier composed authority, more like the stillness of someone who has just heard a sound they cannot identify. She recovered. She was good at recovering. That was the thing about Diana Croft. She was not a stupid person. She was a person who had mistaken a particular kind of intelligence for all kinds of intelligence, which is a specific and expensive error. She leaned slightly forward. She kept her voice low, conscious for the first time of the phones that were filming. She was trying to make the next part private. The terminal was too quiet for private. "I do not know what you just arranged," she said. "But nothing arriving in the next 14 minutes changes the fact that you are in a restricted area without completed verification. Whatever comes through that gate does not undo what is happening right now." Marcus looked at her without expression. "Diana, you held my boarding pass for 9 minutes without scanning it. You did not call the ticket desk. You did not open the verification system. You made your decision about me before I opened my bag. You and I both know that is true." Diana had no clean answer to that. She pivoted to the thing she still had, which was volume. She turned to the terminal and raised her voice to the register she used when she wanted to reassert control of a space. "I want to advise all passengers that this area is currently subject to a security review. Apex Airways sincerely apologizes for any inconvenience. If any passenger is uncomfortable with the current situation, our staff will assist you to alternative seating areas in the main terminal." The response, she expected people gathering their things and moving toward the exits, validating her authority, restoring the shape she wanted the room to have. The response she got, nobody moved. Not one person stood up. Not one person reached for a bag. 3 people who had been sitting in the chairs nearest the exits moved their chairs slightly closer to where Marcus was standing. It was a small movement. It was not coordinated, but it was unmistakable. Diana stared at the room. The room looked back at her. Sandra Bloom shifted. It was not a large movement. She simply took 1 step to the side, slightly away from Diana's shoulder, slightly toward neutral territory. It was the body language of someone who has started calculating which side of a situation they want to be documented on when the documentation is reviewed. Diana noticed. The look she gave Sandra could have peeled paint off a well-maintained surface. Ethan Calloway spoke. He did not address Diana. He addressed the terminal, turning slightly so that his voice reached the corners of the room. "For the record, I have flown first class on this airline for 22 years. In those 22 years, I have never been asked for a second identification. I have never had my clothing referenced as a reason for concern. I have never had a boarding pass examined for 9 minutes while someone decided if I was real enough to be in this room." He paused. "I want everyone here to consider whether there is any explanation for that difference that is not the explanation we are all already thinking of." An elderly woman near the window started clapping. She did it once, then twice. Then she stopped as if surprised by what her own hands had done. Her husband put his hand over hers, not to stop her, to be close to her while she did it. Brett had disappeared briefly and now returned with 2 additional security officers. He placed them on either side of Marcus's chair, which had the effect of making 3 uniformed security personnel surrounding a single calm man in running clothes look precisely like what it was. The room read this immediately. The phones that were already filming reoriented their angles. New phones came up. Ethan was recording now, not subtly, deliberately at eye level the way a person records something they intend to be held as evidence. Brett noticed. Sir, airport security personnel cannot be recorded while performing official duties without. That is not a law, Ethan said. He said it pleasantly, with the quiet authority of someone who has spent 3 decades knowing which things are laws and which things are not. You are welcome to verify that. I will still be recording when you finish. 2 of Brett's 3 additional officers exchanged a look that lasted less than a second, but contained a significant amount of information. Marcus checked his watch. 11 minutes until the jet was at gate 19. He had never been more patient in his life. Patience was something he had inherited, trained, and tested across 30 years of rooms that were determined to tell him what he could not have. He had learned from his father that patience in those rooms was not weakness. It was the choice to let the situation fully ripen before you reached for it. It was the understanding that a moment of reckoning is more complete when the people being reckoned with have had every opportunity to stop and have chosen freely in full light in front of witnesses not to. Diana made her mistake. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him in the way she had not since the moment she first approached, when she had processed his appearance and filed her conclusions and stopped looking, because looking was no longer necessary. But now she was looking again, and something in the looking was different. Something in it recognized that the situation was not unfolding the way situations like this were supposed to unfold. Instead of stopping, she said the sentence that Rosa Figueroa wrote down at 10:03 a.m., and that 5 phone cameras captured from 5 different angles, and that would be played in full by 3 national news networks within 36 hours. We maintain a certain standard here. Not everyone understands what that standard means. But I think you do. The terminal went absolutely silent. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice dropped to the quietest it had been in the entire 45 minutes. He made the room come to him. Say that again? Out loud. I want everyone here to hear exactly what you just said. Diana did not say it again. She turned away. She moved toward the counter where Sandra was standing. She did not look at Rosa. She did not look at Ethan. She did not look at any of the phones. But Rosa had written it down, and the cameras had it. And in 11 minutes, the last piece of the picture was going to arrive at gate 19 with twin engines and a company name on its fuselage, and Diana Croft was going to understand that the standard she maintained had just become the most documented and consequential sentence of her professional life. The energy in the terminal shifted in the way that energy shifts in a room when the balance of power has quietly moved from one side to another and both sides feel it at the same time. Diana felt it as a kind of tightening. Brett felt it as noise that would not organize itself correctly. Marcus felt it as confirmation of something his father had taught him about patience. The witnesses felt it as permission. The mother with the 9-year-old daughter had been sitting near the check-in area since the beginning of the confrontation, one hand on her daughter's arm, the other hand still saying nothing, watching everything. Her daughter had been watching too, with the unguarded directness of a child who has not yet learned to look at injustice sideways. The daughter tugged her mother's sleeve. Her voice was a whisper that was just slightly too loud for the silence the terminal had become. "Mom, why won't they let him sit down? He's just sitting." The mother looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, then at Diana and Brett and the 3 security officers arranged around a single man in running clothes. She picked up her phone and started recording. She did not say anything. She just lifted the phone and let the lens look at what she was looking at. The elderly man near the window leaned to his wife and said, Not quietly in the way that people stop bothering to be quiet when they have decided that quiet is no longer appropriate. "This is wrong." His wife nodded. He said it again once more, as if confirming something to himself. "This is wrong." Neither of them filmed. Neither of them moved from their chairs. But the statement was out in the air now, and several people near them registered it with small nods that they did not realize they were making. Across the terminal, near the far wall, a young black woman in a Navy business suit had been sitting with the particular rigid stillness that people develop when they are watching something that they have a personal relationship with. She had not filmed. She had not spoken. She had been motionless for the entire duration of the confrontation, which from the outside might have looked like composure, but from the inside was the controlled management of something very old and very large. She stood up. Slowly, deliberately, she moved her chair 3 feet closer to where Marcus was standing. She sat back down. She placed her hands in her lap. She did not say a word. She did not need to. The act of moving 3 feet in that terminal at that moment was a complete sentence, and Marcus read it as clearly as if she had shouted. He looked at her. She gave him one small nod. The kind of nod that people who share an understanding exchange when words would be inadequate and redundant. He returned it. Rosa Figueroa had been writing continuously. Her incident log had become something different from what incident logs usually were, which was a procedural document full of neutral language and passive constructions. Rosa's log was precise and specific and named names and quoted directly, which was what incident logs were supposed to do but rarely did when the person being documented was a supervisor. She looked up from the log and read aloud, not to anyone in particular, to the terminal. 9:47 a.m. Terminal Supervisor Croft approaches passenger without stated cause and demands verification. 9:49. Passenger provides boarding pass. Pass is not scanned. 9:51. Security personnel called before any verification attempt is made. 9:53. Passenger provides government-issued photo ID. ID accepted, but system not consulted. 9:55. Security Officer Larson makes physical approach behind passenger's chair. Passenger does not escalate. 10:03. Supervisor Croft makes verbal statement regarding terminal standards to passenger. She stopped. She looked at Diana. That is the log. It is required documentation. Every word of it is accurate and time-stamped. Diana stared at her. Figueroa, that documentation is internal property, and you do not have authorization to... I have the authorization that comes from 4 years of doing my job correctly, Rosa said. This is my job. I am doing it. She went back to writing. Sandra Bloom had gone very still. She had been watching Rosa for the last 10 minutes with an expression that contained more information than Sandra was used to showing on her face while at work. She was thinking about a choice she had made 40 minutes ago when Diana had given her a look and she had reached for her radio, and she was thinking about the distance between that choice and the right thing to do, and that distance was not comfortable to inhabit. Brett tried to reassert control. He made an announcement loud, official, aimed at the terminal. This area is being managed as an active security situation. Passengers are requested to remain in their seats and refrain from interfering with security operations. Any passenger who interferes with security operations may be subject to removal from the terminal. The response from the terminal was not what Brett intended. The announcement read as a threat aimed at the passengers, not at the situation. 3 people who had been sitting quietly stood up. Not to leave. To be standing, which was a way of saying something without saying it. Ethan Calloway, already standing, held his phone higher. "Officer," he said to Brett. His voice was pleasant and completely inflexible. "Are you suggesting that the passengers in this terminal will be removed if they continue to document this interaction?" Brett said. "Interfering with security. Recording is not interfering," Ethan said. "That I know with certainty. And everyone in this room now knows it too, because you just told them to stop, and now they all have a reason to understand why that matters. 2 more phones came up. Brett stood in the middle of the terminal with 3 security officers behind him and a room that had organized itself against him, and he looked for the first time since he had walked over to Diana's shoulder 90 minutes ago, like a man who had not fully thought through what he was doing. Then Diana did the thing. She had been recalculating since the elderly woman started clapping, and the business suit moved her chair, and Rosa began reading the log aloud. She had been running numbers in her head, the kind of numbers that involve how many witnesses there are, and how many phones are recording, and how many words that have already been said cannot be taken back. And somewhere in that calculation she arrived at the conclusion that the only way to still win this was to make it irreversible before the situation could reverse itself. She looked at Marcus. She looked at him the way she had looked at him when she first made her decision. And then she said the thing. We maintain a certain standard here. Not everyone understands what that standard means, but I think you do. The room went still. Marcus looked at her. 5 seconds of silence that felt like 5 minutes. When he spoke, his voice was the quietest it had been in the entire interaction. The room came to it. Say that again. Out loud. Say it again so that every person in this room and every camera running right now can hear exactly what you are telling me. Diana did not say it again. She turned away. She did not look at Rosa, who was writing. She did not look at Ethan, who was filming. She did not look at the young black woman in the navy suit, who had not moved from her repositioned chair and whose expression contained a kind of painful recognition that was not for Diana to witness. 5 phones had caught the sentence. Rosa had it written at 10:03 a.m. with the exact words in quotation marks. 10 minutes until the jet. The terminal watched Diana's back as she walked to the counter, and in the watching, there was the particular silence that falls over a room when the last thing that needed to happen has happened and everyone present understands, without needing it explained, that what comes next is consequence. Brett Larson made his decision. This was the moment that would define what the next phase of his life looked like, and he made it the way people make decisions they do not fully think through. Quickly, from a place of diminishing authority, with the specific logic of someone who believes that the only way to make a thing true is to push hard enough on it. He planted himself directly in front of Marcus and addressed him with the finality of a door being closed and locked. Sir, you are under arrest. The charges are trespassing in a restricted facility and failure to comply with security directives. I am going to need you to place your hands. Don't. Marcus said it the way you say a word when the word is the whole sentence. Quietly. With the weight of someone who has made a decision and has already considered every outcome of that decision and is completely at peace with all of them. Brett heard it. He heard it in the particular way that people hear things that land differently than they expected in the place below the processing and above the reaction where the truth of something settles before the mind is caught up with it. He reached for Marcus's arm anyway. Rosa Figueroa moved. She was not as large as Brett. She was not a trained security officer. She was 27 years old, and her hands were shaking, and she moved anyway, stepping between Brett and Marcus with the kind of decision that people make when they have stopped calculating and started acting from whatever is underneath the calculation. You cannot detain this man, she said. Her voice shook, but it did not stop. He has committed no crime. He has complied with every legitimate request that has been made of him today. He has provided identification. He has provided his boarding pass. He has remained calm and seated, and has not raised his voice or made a single threatening movement in the entire time he has been in this terminal. She looked at Brett directly. If you put your hands on him, I am a witness. This is documented. I need you to understand that before you finish the movement you just started. Brett looked at Rosa. He had the look of a man who had expected her to scatter and was recalibrating. Figueroa, step aside. This does not involve you. I work for the passengers of this airline, Rosa said. He is a passenger of this airline. It involves me. The two additional security officers had positioned themselves flanking Brett, but neither of them moved. One of them, younger, maybe 26, with the expression of someone who came to work this morning expecting a normal Sunday, took a half-step back. It was small enough that Brett did not notice. Everyone else in the terminal did. Ethan Calloway moved. He did not run. He crossed the terminal with the deliberate pace of a man who has made up his mind, and he positioned himself beside Rosa, which placed him directly between Brett's extended arm and Marcus's body. "Officer Larson," he said. "My name is Ethan Calloway. I practiced corporate law in Dallas for 30 years before I went in-house. I am telling you as clearly and specifically as I know how that you do not have legal grounds for this arrest. You cannot document a policy violation because this man has not violated a policy. You cannot establish trespass because he holds a valid ticket that grants him access to this space." He held his phone up. "There are currently 9 people filming this interaction in this terminal. If you complete this arrest, every one of those recordings becomes evidence in a federal civil rights proceeding. I want you to look around this room and think about whether you want to be the person who made that decision." Brett's arm was still extended, but it had not completed its reach. It hovered in the space between decision and consequence, and the hovering told the entire story. Marcus spoke into the pause. His voice was not loud. It was the voice of someone who has decided that what he is about to say is the most important thing he will say in this terminal and has chosen the register accordingly. "Brett," he said. Just his name. Not Officer Larson. Not Sir. Just the name said the way his father said the names of men who were about to make expensive mistakes. "I want you to hear me." Brett looked at him. "I am not your enemy. I am a man who bought a ticket and sat in a chair. I am wearing running clothes because I finished a marathon 4 hours ago in memory of my father who died 14 months ago. I am wearing a medal around my neck because he could not be at the finish line. I am in this terminal because my ticket puts me in this terminal." He paused. "Whatever story you have told yourself about who I am and why I am here, that story is wrong, and you still have time to stop telling it. That time is very short now. But it is not yet gone." Brett stood in the space between his arm and Marcus's shoulder. Behind Marcus, the terminal watched. The elderly couple, the mother and her daughter, the girl's face still open and honest and direct, the young woman in the navy suit perfectly still in her repositioned chair, Ethan filming, Rosa writing, the 9 phones, the held breath of a room that had turned completely and was now waiting for a man in a security uniform to choose between the momentum of a bad decision and the courage to stop it. Brett held. Then Diana Croft appeared at his shoulder. She had been watching from 12 feet away. She had made her calculation. The calculation said if Brett completes the arrest, the situation becomes official, and escalation becomes legitimate. And in official and escalated situations there is bureaucracy and procedure to hide behind, and bureaucracy and procedure were things Diana Croft knew how to navigate. So she said the words that removed from Brett Larson the last small chance he had to stop. "Brett, remove him." Brett's arm moved forward, and through the terminal entrance from the main concourse, Officer Darnell Reyes walked in. Darnell Reyes had been a police officer for 14 years, and in 14 years he had developed a particular skill that no academy had taught him, the ability to read a room in the first 10 seconds of entering it, and know immediately who the threat was, and where the danger lived, and which of the parties present was the one that needed to be protected from what. He read this room in 8 seconds. A calm black man in running clothes with a marathon medal around his neck, surrounded by 3 security officers and a terminal supervisor with 9 phones filming, and a room full of people who had organized themselves in a specific direction. A young Hispanic woman in an airline uniform standing between the man and a security officer's extended arm. A businessman in his 50s recording with his phone at eye level. The body language of the security officer nearest the exit who had taken a step back and was working very hard to look like he had not. Reyes had seen this pattern. He knew what it was. He crossed the terminal without urgency in the steady, purposeful way that experienced officers move in situations that do not yet require running but may require authority. He reached Brett first. He came up beside him, not in front of him. Beside him, which was a deliberate positioning that offered dignity and did not perform confrontation. "Thompson," he said quietly. "Walk me through what happened," Brett explained. His explanation took 90 seconds, and in those 90 seconds he used the words uncooperative and refused and protocol and suspicious and failed to comply. And as he spoke, Reyes listened without expression, the way you listen when you are hearing not just the content of what someone is saying, but the shape of it, the gaps in it, the things that are not there. When Brett finished, Reyes said, "What policy did he violate, Brett?" "He refused to comply with security screening." Reyes: "What was the screening?" "Specifically, what did you ask him to do that constitutes a formal security procedure under airport authority?" Brett gestured. He gestured at the running clothes, at the gym bag, at the medal, at Marcus with the gesture of someone pointing at evidence they cannot name. Reyes did not follow the gesture. He kept his eyes on Brett. "He showed you his boarding pass?" "Yes." "And it was valid?" A pause. "Yes." "Did you scan it?" Longer pause. "The supervisor retained it for verification." "Did the supervisor scan it?" Brett said nothing. Reyes turned to Diana. His voice remained level. "Ma'am, what is the policy violation Diana had prepared for this?" She had prepared the language. "Passengers in premium terminal facilities are subject to elevated verification standards when their presence presents ambiguous indicators of legitimate access. The determination of ambiguous indicators falls within the supervisory authority of terminal management staff." Reyes looked at her for a moment. "Show me that policy in writing." Diana opened her mouth. "Not the general guidelines," Reyes said. "The specific policy. The language that defines ambiguous indicators and gives terminal supervisors the authority to demand verification beyond a valid boarding pass." The language did not exist. Diana did not have it. It had never been written down because it had never needed to be written down because it had never been challenged this directly by someone this specific. Reyes turned to Marcus. He extended his hand. It was the first handshake offered to Marcus by anyone in uniform since Diana had first approached him. "Officer Reyes, Airport Police. May I see your boarding pass?" Marcus took the pass from the table where Diana had left it. She had never returned it, and placed it in Reyes's hand. Reyes produced his own scanner. He held the pass to it. The scanner beeped twice, valid. He looked at the screen. He read the class designation and the status markers and the confirmation number, and he handed the pass back to Marcus. "Your ticket is valid. Your access to this terminal is legitimate. You have every right to be sitting in that chair." He said it clearly, at a volume that carried. He did not say it dramatically. He said it the way you say something that is simply true in a room full of people who needed to hear it, stated by someone with a badge. Then he turned to Brett. He did not raise his voice. He spoke the way people speak when they do not need volume to convey the weight of what they are saying. "Thompson, I am not providing authorization for an arrest. There are no grounds. If you proceed, you are doing it without my backing, and you are doing it on camera in a terminal full of witnesses. I want you to think carefully about what you want the documentation of this day to reflect." Brett's arm came down. All the way down. The movement was small, but it was definitive, and the terminal felt it the way a room feels a held note finally resolved. Rosa Figueroa's pen stopped moving for exactly 2 seconds. Then she wrote down the time, 10:11 a.m. Reyes turned to Diana one final time. His expression had not changed since he entered the terminal. It was the expression of someone who has seen everything and has stopped being surprised by any of it, and who has decided that the most useful thing he can be in situations like this one is precise. "Ma'am, I would strongly suggest stepping back from this situation before it develops further consequences for yourself." Diana did not step back, but she stopped issuing orders. Her voice, when it came, was smaller than it had been at any point in the last hour. "This passenger has not completed required verification." Reyes looked at her. He did not respond. The non-response was its own kind of response. The terminal exhaled. It was audible. Not one breath. Many together, the collective release of a room that has been holding itself very still and has just been given permission to be a room again. Rosa's shoulders dropped half an inch. The mother with the daughter put her phone down and looked at her child. The young woman in the navy suit closed her eyes for 3 seconds, then opened them, then looked at the tarmac through the tall windows. Ethan Calloway lowered his phone from eye level. He did not put it away, but he lowered it. Marcus looked at Officer Reyes. "Thank you," he said. 2 words said with the directness he gave everything. Reyes nodded once. "Do your job," he said, and it was unclear exactly who he was saying it to, which meant he was probably saying it to everyone. 7 minutes. That is how long remained until everything in that terminal changed completely. And I need you to stay with me, because what Marcus Harwell did next, he did not do it for himself. He did it for everyone who ever stood where he stood and had no one standing next to them. That is the part that matters. That is why this story exists. Marcus picked up his phone. He did not pace. He did not stand differently. He stood where he had been standing when Brett's arm came down in the same posture he had held for the past 90 minutes. Spine-straight hands relaxed the marathon medal still around his neck. And he opened his contacts and pressed a name and set the phone on the small side table beside his chair with the speaker facing up. The call connected on the second ring. Harwell Global Logistics. Mr. Harwell's office, Nadia Cruz. The same voice, the same professionalism, the same lack of drama. The terminal heard it, and several people looked at each other. "Nadia, I need you to pull up the Apex Airways account summary. Please read me the contract number and current annual value." "Of course, sir." The brief sound of keys. Contract reference AX-2209-HGL. Current annual logistics services value is $65,400,000. Renewal is scheduled for March. Shall I also pull the supplemental freight agreements? "Not right now." "Who is the current regional director for Apex Airways Western Division, Mr. Patrick Voss? He is listed as your primary Apex liaison." "Should I connect him now?" Marcus glanced at Diana. She was standing very still. Brett was standing very still. The terminal, which had been in the process of beginning to breathe again, had stopped. "Yes, please." The hold tone played for 4 seconds. Then a voice, brisk, professional, carrying the compressed efficiency of someone whose Sunday had been proceeding without incident until approximately 45 seconds ago. "Marcus. Good to hear from you. Is everything all right, Patrick?" Marcus's voice did not change. "Same register, same pace. I am at your Denver Premium Terminal. I have been here for approximately 90 minutes. In that time, I have been told I do not belong in this facility. My boarding pass was held for 9 minutes without being scanned. I was told my clothing was grounds for removal. A security officer attempted to detain me without legal cause. The statement has been recorded by multiple witnesses and by approximately 9 phone cameras that I can count from where I am standing." Silence on the line. Not the silence of surprise. the silence of someone very quickly processing the specific dimensions of a very large problem. Marcus. Patrick. I am not calling for an apology yet. I am calling because you have approximately 7 minutes before a development occurs in this terminal that will make this conversation significantly more public than it already is. I wanted you to have the opportunity to respond before that happens. More silence. Then, can you put the supervisor on the line? Marcus looked at Diana. He held the phone toward her. Diana took the phone the way you take something that you know is going to burn you, but you have no mechanism left to refuse. She pressed it to her ear. Her voice when she spoke was a full register, lower than anything she had managed in the previous 90 minutes. This is Diana Croft. Diana. Patrick Voss's voice was controlled in the way that the voices of senior executives are controlled when they are managing something that has the weight of a financial disaster and the optics of a reputational catastrophe, and they need both hands on it at the same moment. I am watching a live stream of this situation on my phone. I have been watching for approximately 8 minutes. Is the man you have been denying access to a valid first-class ticket holder named Marcus Harwell? Diana said nothing. Diana. I need a yes or no. The terminal was completely silent. 9 phones. Rosa's pen stopped. Ethan stopped. The mother's hand on her daughter's arm stopped. The young woman in the navy suit stopped. Yes. And are you aware that Marcus Harwell is the CEO of Harwell Global Logistics, which holds a $65 million annual services contract with Apex Airways? Diana said nothing for 3 seconds. I was not aware of his identity. That said, Patrick Voss very quietly is the part that is entirely beside the point. Diana, you are suspended effective immediately pending termination review. Please hand the phone back to Mr. Harwell. Diana's hand moved away from her ear very slowly. She looked at the phone she was holding. Then she walked to Marcus and placed it in his hand without meeting his eyes. She moved to the nearest chair and sat down. The authority she had worn into this terminal 90 minutes ago left her face the way a light leaves a room when someone turns off the switch. Not gradually. At once. Brett Larson was standing 6 feet away. He watched Diana sit down. He watched her face change. He looked down at his own hands. He sat down on the arm of a chair, then on the seat of it, not because anyone told him to, but because standing required a commitment to a posture he no longer had any way to maintain. On the phone, Patrick Voss was speaking. Marcus, this is inexcusable, and I want to be direct about that. I am initiating a formal review of this incident and every employee involved. I want to speak with you in person or by video as soon as you are in Atlanta. I appreciate that, Patrick. Before we conclude, I need you to hear something. Marcus held the phone up toward the terminal. He turned it slowly a small arc so that the microphone faced the room. The room heard itself, the particular sound of a space that is holding its breath. And that sound traveled down the line to Patrick Voss in whatever office he was sitting in, and Voss heard it and understood something about the weight of the moment that no damage control briefing would have conveyed as clearly. Marcus brought the phone back. These people stayed, he said. They filmed. They documented. They spoke up when speaking up had a cost attached to it. Some of them work for your airline, and they risked their positions to tell the truth. Whatever the formal response to this situation is, I want those people to be part of the conversation, not as afterthoughts, as principles. Understood, Voss said. Consider it done. Marcus ended the call. He set the phone on the table. He looked around the room, at Rosa, whose pen had started moving again, at Ethan, whose phone was still up but whose jaw had unclenched, at the young woman in the navy suit who was looking at Marcus with an expression that contained everything she had not said in the entire 90 minutes, which was more than most people say in a year. At the mother and daughter, the girl watching with her full attention, the way children watch things when they understand that something important is happening, even if they cannot name what it is. At Brett, sitting at the chair. At Diana, sitting in the chair. At Officer Reyes, standing near the entrance, watching the room with the steady attention of someone who has decided that his job right now is to bear witness and be available. Marcus looked at Diana. He said, "You had 90 minutes. I gave you every one of them. I want you to know that what happened in this terminal today was not inevitable. At any point in the last 90 minutes, you could have picked up that scanner and scanned my ticket and said, 'Good afternoon,' and that would have been the end of it. You chose every moment that led to this one. I need you to sit with that." Diana did not respond. She was looking at the floor. Brett said nothing. The terminal was very quiet. And then through the floor-to-ceiling windows that had been showing Marcus the tarmac for the entire duration of this story, a new shape appeared on the concrete. A long white fuselage moving with the deliberate grace of something large that is being handled with care. On its side, in clean navy letters that were legible from 40 feet inside the terminal glass, Harwell Global Logistics. The sound arrived before the aircraft was fully visible. A deep, even resonance that built from somewhere below the usual register of the terminal, below the coffee machines and the boarding announcements and the ambient conversation, and grew into something that the body registered as much as the ears. The particular sound of large turbofan engines winding down from cruise thrust to taxi power, the controlled, purposeful sound of something that has covered a great distance and is now arriving exactly where it intended. Every person in the terminal turned toward the windows. The aircraft came into view, slowly taxiing with the deliberate grace of something that does not need to hurry. It was a Bombardier Global 7500 white from nose to tail, and on its fuselage in clean, confident navy blue lettering, letters large enough to read clearly through the terminal glass from 40 feet away. Harwell Global Logistics. Someone in the terminal said very quietly, "Oh." Then nothing. 3 seconds of nothing, which in a room with 40 people in it is a remarkable and specific silence. Then the room broke, not chaotically, not all at once, but the held breath that the terminal had been holding for the last 90 minutes released itself in overlapping waves, whispers, then voices, one person laughing with the helpless, disbelieving quality of laughter that comes when something resolves so completely that the body does not know what else to do with the relief. The elderly man near the window said to his wife, not quietly, "I knew it. I knew something was different about him." His wife shook her head, but she was smiling, not at the jet, at her husband. At the particular satisfaction of a man who has been paying attention and has been proven right about what he was paying attention to. The daughter pulled on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, is that his?" The mother looked at the fuselage, looked at the lettering, looked at Marcus standing still in the center of the terminal watching the aircraft taxi toward Gate 19 with an expression that contained nothing performative. Just a man watching something that belonged to him arrive, which is a thing that is both simple and complicated when the arrival has this particular context. "Yes," the mother said. The daughter turned this over for a moment. Then, "Good." Rosa Figueroa was standing behind her counter. She had been writing continuously for most of the last 90 minutes, and her hand was beginning to ache, but she had not put the pen down. When the jet came into view, her pen stopped. She looked at the fuselage. She looked at the lettering. She covered her mouth with one hand. Not to suppress something dramatic, but with the reflex of someone absorbing something that has landed with unexpected weight. She had known abstractly since the phone call to Nadia what she was dealing with. Knowing it abstractly and watching a private aircraft with his company's name on it taxi to the gate were two different experiences. The young woman in the navy suit stood up. She stood up with a deliberateness that had nothing to do with the jet, and everything to do with the decision she had been building toward for the entire time she had been sitting in that repositioned chair. She began to applaud. Not quickly, not loudly, slowly, with the measured pace of someone doing something that is not about performance. She was clapping for herself, as much as for Marcus, for something she recognized, for a thing that had just been demonstrated in front of her that she had been told in various rooms in various ways across various years was not possible. She had been told, you cannot win that quietly. She had been told that the only way through was noise and documentation, and lawyers and formal complaints. She had been told that sitting still and waiting was surrender. She was watching it be wrong. 3 other people joined her. Then 4 more. Then the elderly man who could not clap standing up because of his hip, but made the gesture with his hands where he sat, which his wife completed for him by placing her hands together once firmly. Marcus did not look at any of them for the first few seconds. He looked at the aircraft. He thought about his father, who had started with a $14,000 loan and a truck with 140,000 miles, and who had never lived to see the jet, and who had told his son to stay still and let them see him wait, and whose voice Marcus had been hearing in the back of his mind for the entire 90 minutes of this terminal and for the 14 months before it. He thought, I stayed. I waited. I gave them every chance. He thought, I am the last man standing in the room. Then he turned to the terminal and to the people in it, and he let the room see something that it had not seen on his face since Diana Croft first walked toward him. The ghost of a smile. Not triumph. Resolve. The quiet kind. Captain Jerome Miles appeared at the aircraft door. He was 53, former Air Force, a man who had carried himself with the particular upright efficiency of military service for 30 years and had never quite left it behind, which, in his profession, was not a liability. He stepped into the terminal, wearing his uniform, read the room in the practiced second of an experienced professional, and walked directly to Marcus. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harwell," he said, military precision warmth underneath it. "Ready when you are." "Thank you, Captain. Let's take a moment first." Marcus turned to the room. He looked at Diana sitting in her chair, hands folded, staring at something that was not in the terminal. He looked at Brett in his chair, looking at his own hands. He looked at Rosa behind her counterpen, finally capped. He looked at Ethan and the mother and the daughter and the elderly couple and the young woman in the suit who had moved her chair 3 feet and started clapping. He looked at Officer Reyes standing near the entrance with the quiet steadiness of a man who has done his job and is content with how he did it. He took account. He acknowledged without performance who had been in this room when this happened. Then he said, not loudly, not quietly, at exactly the volume that reached every person present, "I want to be clear about something. I am not satisfied because those 2 people are sitting in chairs without their jobs. I am not glad this happened. I do not consider any part of the last 90 minutes a victory." He paused. "What I am glad about is that this room did not look away. That is not nothing. That is the whole point of what just happened here. The terminal received this." The young woman in the navy suit gave him one final nod. He returned it. Patrick Voss called back in 4 minutes. Marcus answered on speaker. The terminal, which had been beginning to settle into something approaching normal, stopped settling and went quiet again with the automatic attention of people who understand they are still inside a story. Marcus. Voss's voice had the quality of someone who has spent the last 4 minutes in rapid, unpleasant conversations and has arrived at the version of his response that is going to have to live in the public record. "I have reviewed the incident log submitted by Rosa Figueroa, which is, I want to state for the record, exactly the kind of documentation our gate agents are supposed to create, and I have reviewed 3 additional eyewitness accounts from passengers who provided statements through our customer service line in the last 8 minutes. He paused. "Effective immediately, Diana Croft's employment with Apex Airways is terminated. Brett Larson's employment with Contracted Airport Security Services is terminated, and we will be requesting a formal review of his conduct record Sandra Bloom is placed on formal review pending the complete inquiry. He paused again. And Rosa Figueroa is to be commended formally and publicly. I want that on the record and I want her to hear it. Murmurs through the terminal. A few people started filming again. The consequence moment, not the confrontation. Marcus to Voss. What about the passengers who were affected by this? Voss. Every passenger in that terminal today will receive a full refund for their tickets and direct communication from our executive office. Not a form letter. Personal correspondence. Good, Marcus said. Is there anything else I should address right now? Marcus looked at the terminal, at the faces he had been looking at for the last 90 minutes. Patrick, what happened in this terminal today did not start with Diana Croft. It starts every time a decision like hers goes unchallenged because the person on the receiving end of it does not have a phone call to make. I want that to be the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. I hear you, Voss said. We will have that conversation. You have my commitment. Marcus ended the call. Diana stood up. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Rosa or Ethan or Officer Reyes. She looked at the floor as she walked toward the staff exit. The particular posture of someone carrying a weight they have not yet found the language to name. Her badge caught the light from the windows once briefly, and then she was through the door. Brett followed 30 seconds later. Not at the same pace, not making eye contact with Diana or with any of the room. He walked the way people walk when they are aware that they are being watched and have run out of the energy to perform for the watching. Nobody clapped. Nobody said anything. The terminal watched them leave in silence, which was more final than any other response available. Sandra Bloom remained. She had been standing near the counter for the last 20 minutes, not participating, not opposing existing in the carefully maintained neutrality of someone who has chosen a position that in retrospect has turned out to be a position. She stood there for a moment after the door closed behind Brett, and then she walked across the terminal to where Marcus was standing. She stopped in front of him. She was not steady, but she was there. I should have stopped it, she said. Her voice was not asking for absolution. It was stating a fact. I knew it was wrong from the first 5 minutes. I could see what was happening, and I knew what it was, and I reached for my radio anyway because that was the easier thing to do. I should have stopped it. Marcus looked at her for a moment, not unkindly, with the particular attention he gave to things that were real and deserved to be received as real. That is the most important thing anyone has said in this terminal today, he said. Not the most powerful, the most important. Remember what you just said. That is what being better starts with. Sandra nodded. She stood there for one more moment as if she needed to let that land fully before she could move. Then she went back to her counter and sat down. She opened her incident log, the one she had not contributed to during the relevant events of the morning, and she began writing from memory. Rosa came out from behind her counter. She had waited for Sandra to finish. She walked across the terminal floor to where Marcus was standing and stopped in front of him. She was not sure she would say later what she had intended to say. What came out was the simplest version of the truth. I was not sure I was doing the right thing, she said. Every time I spoke up, I thought, this might be it. This might be the thing that ends this job. And I kept thinking about it, and I kept writing anyway, because if I stopped writing, it felt like I was agreeing. Marcus looked at her. You were doing the right thing, he said, and your job is safer because of it, not despite it. He paused. You should know that Patrick Voss read your incident log before he made those calls. Your documentation was the foundation of everything that just happened. You wrote clearly. That changed this. Rosa looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once with the economy of someone who has received something real and is storing it carefully. Ethan Calloway extended his hand. Marcus took it. I have been that man, Ethan said. The one who watches something wrong happen and opens his laptop and tries to pretend the volume on his conscience is lower than it actually is. I am glad I was not him today. Marcus. So am I. Officer Reyes had been making his way toward the exit. He stopped. Mr. Harwell. For the record, I would have verified your ticket the moment I arrived, regardless of any other factor. There was nothing there. I want that to be on record, too. Marcus. Thank you for saying it out loud, anyway. Reyes gave him a nod and walked out through the main entrance with the quiet, steady departure of a man who came to do his job and did it. Before Marcus walked to the jet, Captain Miles stepped aside to give him the floor. This was not a press conference. There was no podium. There was no prepared statement. There was a terminal full of people who had witnessed something together, and there was a man standing among them in running clothes and a finisher's medal. And there was the particular quality of attention that settles over a room when everyone in it has been through something and recognizes that what comes next will determine how they carry it. Marcus looked at the room. Not over it. At it. He made eye contact briefly with the daughter who was looking back at him with the complete undefended attention that children have not yet learned to manage. He looked at the elderly man who had said "this is wrong" out loud when he could have said nothing. He looked at Rosa behind her counter, at Ethan still standing, at the young woman in the navy suit who was watching him with the expression of someone who has been holding something for a very long time and is considering for the first time setting it down. He told them 4 things. He did not announce that he was going to tell them 4 things. He simply spoke, and the spaces between the things were the punctuation. My father built a $3 billion company, he said. He wore a suit to every meeting for 20 years. Not because he preferred suits, because he understood that black men in business were expected to arrive with twice the preparation, twice the documentation, and the right costume, or the room would never give them the 5 minutes they needed to prove they deserved the 5 minutes. He paid that tax every day for 20 years, and he built something extraordinary in spite of it. And then he died 14 months ago, and they are still collecting. He paused. The terminal did not move. I ran this morning in his memory. 26 miles and 2/10. I finished in 3 hours and 44 minutes, and I did not stop at the finish line because stopping has always felt wrong to me. The medal around my neck is not an achievement. It is a statement. My father had a heart that could not finish the work. I am finishing it, every day, in whatever room they tell me I cannot enter. He paused again. Then he turned slightly, and what he said next, he said to everyone who had stayed. You did something today that cannot be undone. Every person in this room who did not look away, who filmed, who spoke, who moved their chair 3 feet, who said "this is wrong" out loud to a spouse who already knew, you made this a room where what happened to me did not happen quietly. That is not a small thing. He looked at the daughter. That is not a small thing at all. That is the entire thing. The daughter looked at her mother. The mother looked at Marcus. Her eyes were bright. He looked at the room one more time. And what he said, last he said to no one specifically, which meant he said it to everyone. If you have never been told that you do not belong in a room you paid to enter, if that experience is not part of your life, if you have never had someone hold your boarding pass for 9 minutes looking for a reason to give it back, I need you to understand that it happens every day. Not just in airports, in offices and restaurants and neighborhoods and hospitals and schools, to people who have worked as hard as I have and built what I have built and who still stand in that terminal every day without a private jet to prove their point. He let that sit. I had a jet. Most people have only their dignity. Please be the kind of person who helps them keep it. The terminal received this, not with applause, not with noise, with the specific full-bodied stillness of people who have heard something true and are deciding where to put it. The young woman in the navy suit had been still throughout. She had not said a single word in the 90-plus minutes of the confrontation and its aftermath. She had moved her chair. She had nodded. She had started clapping when the jet appeared. She had stored everything else inside. Now, as Marcus finished speaking, she looked at him. He looked at her. The look lasted long enough to be a full exchange. Whatever passed between them needed no translation and no witness. It was between two people who understood with the specific understanding of people who have paid the same tax in the same rooms, what the last 2 hours had cost and what it had meant. She gave him one final nod. He returned it. Then he picked up his duffel bag. He adjusted the marathon medal, straightening it slightly. A small automatic gesture that was also not small. He looked at Captain Miles. "Let's go home, Captain." They walked toward the jetway. Rosa watched from behind her counter, her log closed, now the pen capped. Ethan watched from his chair laptop, still in his bag, forgotten. Officer Reyes had already gone, but the steadiness he had brought to the room remained in it. At the door to the jetway, Marcus paused. He turned back one last time. "Rosa." She looked up. "Your log saved everything. Write clearly. Always." She nodded. He went. The jetway door closed behind him, and Captain Miles, with the quiet, specific click of something that has ended and also begun. The terminal was silent for 5 more seconds. Then the mother turned to her daughter. "What do you think about that?" she asked. The daughter thought about it seriously. "I think he was right," she said. "He was just sitting." Her mother nodded. "Yes," she said. "He was." 6 days after the incident at Denver International, Patrick Voss called Rosa Figueroa directly. He told her she was being promoted to customer experience supervisor for the Denver terminal, the youngest person ever to hold the role. He said the airline needed someone in that position who understood the difference between a policy and a preference, and who had demonstrated under significant personal pressure that she knew which one mattered. Rosa told him she appreciated the call. She also told him what she actually needed: a terminal where she would never have to open an incident log for the reasons she had opened one that Sunday. Voss said she would be the one who built that terminal. She believed him enough to try. Sandra Bloom resigned 2 weeks later. Not because she was asked to, because she could not sit at that counter and pretend that the distance between who she had been on that Sunday and who she wanted to be was not a distance she had to do something about. She enrolled in a conflict resolution program at a community college in Denver. She did not know yet what she was building toward. She was starting with what she had. Marcus Harwell flew home to Atlanta in 11 minutes of runway and 30 seconds of silence before he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the day. Not the victory. He did not experience it as a victory exactly. He experienced it as something more complicated, the satisfaction of a kept promise, which is different from winning and quieter and more permanent. He thought about his father in the green chair telling him to stay still and let them see him wait. He had waited. He had not performed. He had given the room the chance to be better, and some of it had taken the chance, and that felt like something Robert Harwell would have recognized. 3 weeks later, Marcus dedicated a wing of the Harwell Foundation's new Atlanta headquarters to his father. The wing offered free business mentorship to first-generation Black entrepreneurs, because Robert Harwell had always said that the point of making it through a door was to turn around and hold it open. Every day in terminals and lobbies and boardrooms and hallways, someone is told, quietly, loudly, with a look or with a policy, that they do not belong somewhere they have every right to be. Most of them do not have a private jet to prove the point. They have only their dignity and the people around them who choose in that moment whether to look away or to stay. Rosa stayed. Ethan stayed. The elderly man said this is wrong out loud. The daughter asked the question children ask when they have not yet been taught to stop asking it. Be the person who stays. Be the person who says the true thing out loud, because the next person sitting in that chair needs to know the room can turn. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to look away first. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you believe that dignity belongs to everyone, not just the people who can prove it with a private jet, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Every share, every like, every new subscriber helps these stories reach more people. Because somewhere right now, someone is sitting in a chair they have every right to sit in, and they need to know that rooms like this one can turn. Do not let them sit there alone. Share this story. Subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.